Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the strategic outlook for the Middle East in 2026, a year that's really been defined by one massive conflict and the shockwaves it sent across the entire globe.
So, let's start here. As 2026 kicked off, this quote from the Sufan Center pretty much nailed it. Analysts everywhere saw the region teetering on a knife's edge. One wrong move could be the difference between some kind of fragile peace and a catastrophic slide into a full-blown regional war.
To really get how this all blew up, you've got to understand the scene beforehand. The whole area was, well, it was a tinderbox, just waiting for a match.
Just look at this map of instability. You had simmering conflicts and fragile ceasefires just about everywhere. Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen. And that's not even getting into the full-on civil wars raging in Sudan and Libya. Every single one of these was a potential flashpoint. It really wasn't a question of if something would ignite, but when and where.
And then, in February, that spark finally hit the powder keg. Years of shadow wars and simmering tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States just boiled over into open conflict.
This timeline is so telling because it shows you just how fast everything fell apart. It all started back in June 2025 with what some were calling a limited 12-day war, basically U.S. airstrikes. But by January 2026, Iran was dealing with massive protests at home. Then February hits. The final attempt at diplomacy fails. The U.S. finishes its biggest military buildup in the area since 2003, and on February 28th, that's it. It's on.
Now, this wasn't your typical start to a war. The very first move was what's known as a decapitation strike. Think about that for a second. The goal wasn't just to hit military targets. It was to take out the entire senior leadership, including the supreme leader himself. It is an absolutely massive gamble. Because if you miss, you've just guaranteed an all-out furious response.
And this slide just lays out the completely opposite goals here. On one side, you have the US and Israel trying to be surgical, to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, take out its missiles, its navy. Iran's plan? Totally different. Their response was designed to cause as much widespread pain as possible. Hit US bases, shut down the Strait of Hormuz, essentially turn the entire Middle East into the battlefield.
And Iran's retaliation was incredibly swift, and it hit the global economy right in its most vulnerable spot.
So Iran immediately made good on its threat, choking the critical Strait of Hormuz with mines and attack boats. The U.S. fired back with a naval blockade of Iran's ports, and what you ended up with was this unprecedented dual blockade. It was a complete economic stranglehold. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out.
The result was just instantaneous. We're talking about a 95% reduction in ship traffic through the strait. 95%. It's like turning off a massive faucet for a huge chunk of the world's energy supply. Just gone, overnight.
The effect on energy markets was absolutely brutal. Oil shot up to nearly $120 a barrel in the first week, a price that sends tremors through every single economy on the planet. The International Energy Agency didn't mince words. They called it the largest supply disruption in history, ever.
But it is so crucial to understand this was not just an oil crisis. Not at all. It was a shock to the entire global supply chain. Qatar's natural gas exports were slashed. The world's top aluminum smelter had to cut its output. The ripple effects drove up global food prices and even hit high-tech manufacturing by disrupting the supply of things like helium. It was a systemic crisis.
So, let's shift to the strategic fallout. How has this conflict completely reshaped the power dynamics in the region and, just as importantly, U.S. policy?
And this right here is the central irony of the whole situation. You had an American administration that explicitly wanted to pivot away from the Middle East. But what happened? They got dragged right back in deeper than ever. By trying to manage the conflict, the U.S. became the main mediator and security guarantor, the exact opposite of their objective.
The war also completely fractured Iran's network of proxies. Now, some groups like Hezbollah and Hamas were severely weakened, but others became dangerously unpredictable. In Iraq, militias basically went rogue, launching hundreds of their own attacks. And the Houthis in Yemen, they smartly sat on the sidelines to protect their own truce. So the result wasn't a weaker axis of resistance, it was a much more chaotic and decentralized threat.
Which brings us to where things stand now, in late April 2026. A temporary ceasefire is holding, but it's fragile,
and the region's future really hinges on which of three very distinct paths it's about to go down.
So this is the key takeaway. The end of the major fighting is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new, deeply uncertain chapter. And there are three very different potential futures. 1, maybe the regime in Iran collapses and a new government makes a deal. 2, you get a grinding stalemate that cripples the global economy. Or 3, the nightmare scenario, a full-scale escalation into total war.
And this is the question that's now hanging over the entire world. The choices made in the next few months, they're not just going to decide the fate of Iran, they're going to define the stability of the whole global order for years to come.